Eric Darling here with Darling Data. And I've got a big smile on my face today because me and Bats are going to be talking about one of our favorite subjects, and that is code formatting. Now, code formatting for me, of the T-SQL variety, essentially comes in, well, I mean, I guess you could call it three measures. One is the way that you write the query, right? The way that you indent things, capitalize things, so forth. Place your commas, right? And also the way that you organize code, so larger groups of code, which you might associate with something like a stored procedure. You are doing all of the things that sort of belong together, all together. So when you declare variables, you're doing that all in one place. If you're setting those variables equal to something else, you're also doing that as much as possible all in one place. We'll talk about an exception for that. You're creating temp tables, you're doing that all in one place, and so forth, because one of the worst things that I run into when dealing with client code is stuff that's been added on over the years where, you're reading through a stored procedure and you're like, oh, I've accounted for all these things. And then you get 2,000 lines in and you realize some other knucklehead has, added all these other things and declared stuff and created tables like down through the second half of the procedure, and now it's just like this mishmash, right? It's just like it just makes things a lot harder to follow. And when we're trying to figure out like the things that are in play for like what you have to work with, it is much easier and much more convenient to have everything as much as possible together. So that's what we're going to be talking about in the formatting episode of our journey through SQL Server stored procedures. But before we do all that, of course, we have to talk about the normal sort of stuff and how you can engage with your dear friend Eric Darling more. If you would like to support this channel, helpful little link right in the video description. You click on it, you give me $4 a month, we're all happy. You can choose more than $4 a month if you'd like, but one pre-tax single shot of New York espresso is just about as low as you can go there. If you are for some reason opposed to caffeinated beverages, you can comment, you could subscribe, and if you would like to ask me a question that shows up in an office hours episode, there's a link also in the video description that will take you to this thing, and you can submit your questions. If you are beyond the help of YouTube lessons and office hours questions and like basically anything else, and you need help performance tuning your SQL Server, I am available to do all of these things. And as always, my rates are reasonable. Also reasonable are my rates for SQL Server training. I've got about 24 plus hours of it. You can get it for about 150 USD. That belongs to you for the rest of your life. No backsies. Don't want it back. You've probably spit on it. As far as upcoming events go, SQL Saturday, New York City 2025 is taking place May the 10th. If you should attend, if you are a company watching this, you should sponsor. And we have a pre-con on May the 9th, all about performance tuning with Andreas Wolter. Smart fella, used to work at Microsoft. Probably the smartest thing he's ever done is leave Microsoft. But we're all happy to have him back in the real world. So with that out of the way, let's talk about code formatting here. Now, that was the wrong tab to have up front. So first, there are a list of things that I have rather strong feelings about. I strongly dislike tabs. I realize that every time I talk about my dislike for tabs, there is a chorus of people talking about the visually impaired and how when they use tabs, they can do things better. And if you are in that situation, if you're in that condition, and you want to use tabs, I don't blame you. I used to work with a fellow who did QA. He was in real tough shape, in the eyeball department, you would walk by his desk and there would be like a single letter on the screen. Like I don't know how he got anything done, but he was very good in the QA department. Apparently he had worked out whatever he had to work out in order to be very proficient in his job. But for me, when I'm writing T-SQL, and let's be honest, most of the time I am maintaining this T-SQL on my own. There are a handful of contributors who I am ever grateful for, but I find tabs, or more specifically, when tabs and spaces get mixed, to be quite offensive. There's nothing worse than when you're trying to like format and line up your code, and you like you hit enter and then you like delete two spaces, and then you go to delete that third space and it jumps back like two full tab stops for some reason, and you're like, a lot of stuff going on in there. Other things that I find offensive are leading commas. Anyone who says it makes taking things in and out of the select list easier has never taken the first thing out of the select list. So that causes problems for the 40 other columns you're selecting. Things that I dislike but perhaps feel somewhat less strongly about: all uppercase and all lowercase. All lowercase, of course, just looks strangely juvenile, and all uppercase looks like Oracle shouting. I really dislike when new things are not on new lines. So things like from, join, on, where, and, or, order by, and group by. I guess partition by should be in that list too. I think all of these things are deserving of their own line, so that you can figure out exactly where things start and end. It becomes very confusing when, just like it was like you're reading a windowing function or something, and it's just like row number over partition by order, like all across on one line. These things deserve your attention. Select queries where it's like select long select list from table, and then like down here it's like where, and you're like, how did you get that? Like put stuff where everyone can see it. It's especially helpful because you are generally reading T-SQL in a very like sort of top-down fashion, and being like often like the list of columns in the select list is maybe not quite as important as figuring out like, oh, we're selecting from these tables, join to these tables, things like that. So this stuff really does deserve new lines. A lack of indenting in T-SQL makes things incredibly confusing, and proper indenting really does lead to it being a lot easier for you to figure out which blocks of things belong together, especially if you are doing begin and end blocks. If you have parentheses contents, it makes it much easier to figure things out when things are indented, and you can see this block belongs here, belongs to this thing. Leaving as out of table aliases, it's just somewhat irksome. There was actually kind of a funny story here. There's one client who I was working with, and we were looking at their code, and we realized that they were using the old style like from table no lock hint, right? Not with no lock, but no lock was spelled wrong. And they were like, wait, how does that even work? And I was like, because SQL Server is not interpreting no lock with two Ks as a hint. It's interpreting it as a table alias. So that was kind of funny. I strongly prefer the column equals expression aliasing, because it lines up all the column names where you can read through them and see where things are. When it's like you write out this whole complex long expression and then it's as something, it like the context switch to look all the way over here to see a column name and all the other column names are here. Not so great. Top expressions without parentheses should be banned. I hate those. Align parentheses tend to work out much better because it's a lot easier to mentally grasp what belongs in this group of things. When you do stuff like this and give things weird little hugs, it just looks strange. It doesn't look good. There are other things that I will usually tweak and tinker with as I'm formatting code, but that's about That's about the list of like the most important stuff for me, I think. When you think about formatting code, though, like I said earlier, it's not just merely about where, like, this stuff up there, like the indenting and the grouping and the stuff like that. It makes, like, when you're writing code in a procedure, it's really, really helpful to have everything that has a certain action, like declaring variables, setting variables, creating temp tables, like stuff like that. It makes a lot more sense to do all that stuff all together, so you know which section of code is responsible for that. So if there's ever a problem, you know where to go. Like if you're declaring variables, like again, like 2,000 lines into a stored procedure, or creating a table like 3,000 lines into a stored procedure, and there's ever a problem with that, it's just like, oh, okay, now, well, it's not up with the rest of them. Now I gotta go way down here to go do stuff. It's annoying. Not a good way to spend your time. So the things that I will lend some leniency to in these regards are select into. And the reason why I will allow some leniency here is because there are certain times when you want to just do a simple select into. It makes life easier. Perhaps there is some other benefit to it. Maybe for some reason creating the table and doing the insert, you are just not getting a fully parallel insert from it. Even with a tab block hint, SQL Server gets weird sometimes. So sometimes the select into is necessary, and if that's way down in a store procedure, I get it. It's not completely off limits. The other thing that I am lenient with is declaring cursors, and I'm going to show you an example where I was even lenient with myself when it came to declaring a cursor. Of course, it is perhaps extra strange for me because I strongly prefer cursor variables over regular named cursors, because the cool thing about cursor variables is you don't need to close or deallocate them. I mean, technically, you only need to deallocate because deallocate closes too, but when you use cursor variables, you don't have to remember to do either one. SQL Server scopes them and like a normal variable and closes them out when you're done with the block of code. So let's take a look at my store procedure SP log hunter, and I'm using this one because I think it is the shortest of my procedures, and that's good for all of us because I've already been talking for like almost 13 minutes. And we haven't looked at any code yet. And I don't want to spend a half hour going through SP human events or quickie store where there is an abundance of code. Though I would say that if you ever want good examples of formatting dynamic SQL, there are very good examples in those procedures. So here's SP log hunter. We talked about ANSI settings before. Like I said, a lot of this stuff, like I put at the top because this is stuff people should like be aware of, like care about when they're doing things with store procedures. Since I'm never going to be calling this from an application where it might have different ANSI settings, nor am I overly concerned about filtered indexes, computed columns, or index views, it doesn't matter for me to put this up here. Then some a little bit of green text, a little bit of information about what's going on in here, right? Where to go to get support, even though everyone just sends me emails anyway. And then, of course, we have our parameters. And I like to document the parameters up here where they actually live in case you're just looking at the script file. But I also like to do that in a little help section. So SQL Server has a couple very helpful views. Sys.parameters, sys.all objects, and well, you could do sys.objects and sys.types. And what you can do is you can actually get the list of parameters for a specific store procedure, and you can also put them in a help section here where you can just say, hey, this is what this means. You can put all sorts of good information in there. So I like to include a description, valid inputs, and default values for them so everyone knows where they're going. MIT license stuff because I'm cool like that. And then moving into grouping stuff where it belongs. Before I get into most anything else, what I want to do is make sure that I am conditionally able to execute the procedure that I'm running. So stuff like checking to make sure that we're SA, right? That's a good way to figure out if I'm going to be able to run this thing. If we're in RDS, I can't read the error log the same way as I can when I'm on regular SQL Server. Even managed instance does allow you to get the error logs, I think. I'm pretty sure it does, but Azure SQL DB does not. RDS does allow you to get to the error log, but it's through this other procedure that doesn't have the same parameters and searching stuff in there. I am thinking about working out a fix with that where I would just read in the whole error log and then do the search off that, but I don't know, we'll see. But here's our check for Azure SQL DB, where we will not attempt to run this here if that's going on. There's one other check that results in a return, right? That results in a full error, and that's if someone is searching for a language ID that does not exist, right? So if you search for a language ID 999999 or something, that's not going to happen for you. But then there's fixes to stuff, right? So this is where if parameters are set to odd values, I'll attempt to psychically correct them so that the store procedure runs without any weird mixed up stuff going on. So there's a bunch of that. And then down a little bit further, this is where I declare the variables that I need to do different things in the procedure, but this all happens in one place. And since I have, what do you call it? Not a whole lot going on in this one. There's a very limited list of variables in here, and I can set those very easily here where I care about them. Down here, this is where I create my temp tables, and this all happens in the same place, right? All the temp tables get created, and then we go and we do some work, right? And this is where we actually start doing things in the procedure to look at what we have available. So I talked about this in another video. This is all on one line, just because it's a debug statement. Maybe not the most consistent thing, but sometimes it just is a little bit more convenient for your sake to just sort of stick stuff in like a debug thing in here like this, so that your store procedure isn't 10,000 lines of perfectly formatted debugs. Like, this isn't too bad. But stuff that I like to do is make sure that when I am debugging things with a temp table, I include the table name and what I'm selecting from, so I know what results I'm looking at. Because if I have like you saw, I had like 6 or 8 temp tables up there. What I don't want is a bunch of selecting from temp tables and not knowing where the results are coming from, which, like, especially if one is empty, like, what do you do, right? Like, it's going to be hard to figure out what you're dealing with. Some pretty boring stuff in here. There was something else that I wanted to get down to. I believe it was the cursor variable, and that is right here. So this is another place where I'm sort of lenient about when things do get declared and set up, where I declare the cursor variable here, and I set the options for that here. It just makes it just makes a little bit more sense with stuff like this to have it declared where it's going to be used. There aren't a lot of other cases where I feel the same way about this particular thing, but for me, declaring cursors is one of those things, because there's not a lot of sense in declaring a cursor and then having, like, way up at the top, and then having someone be like, well, wait a minute, when does this cursor happen, right? So, like, for me, declaring the cursor inside of the right around the looping code is the smartest thing to do, right? That makes the most sense to me. And then helpful debug stuff. So this is a multi-line debug. I do have the begin and end and everything on its own line, and then down here there's just a little bit more of the what do you call it? More debug stuff. There was something else I was supposed to be looking for in here. When we return the results, right? So that's sort of unimportant stuff. But anyway, when we're like returning the results, again, make sure that the table name is in there, so I know that this is the result of like everything that got put into the error log table of like the stuff messages we cared about, right? So like this whole big block of stuff way up here. These are all the messages that I want to search for in the error log. This is the important stuff where it's like might be something wrong, might be good informational stuff. So down here is where I select out of that table. And then if we hit any errors in the store procedure, I log those to a temp table. And if there's anything in the error error, like if any of the command statements errored out in there, those get caught here, and I return those only if there's anything in there. So, apart from the like actual query formatting stuff that I feel strongly about, tabs, commas, new lines for things, uppercase, lowercase, parentheses, indenting, things like that. It does make your life and the life of everyone who has to deal with your code a lot easier if you put everything that performs a specific function all together. So again, like declaring the variables, setting the variables, creating temp tables, table variables, things like that. It really does behoove you to do those things so that when other people go into work with your code, they're sort of aware of like just how much of these things like they're going to have to look at and work with and deal with and everything else. It also just helps to be well organized when you're writing larger complex pieces of code, because there's probably going to be enough complicated query logic without there being a whole lot of disorganized code logic as well. So anyway, that's how I feel about formatting. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I hope you learned something. I hope that you will take some of this stuff to heart, and when you're working with queries and stored procedures, you'll start to organize and format and get things looking a little bit nicer and tidier, and contribute to nice, clean, readable code. When folks out there in the world start talking about how CTEs make things more readable, they don't. They sure don't. Nicely formatted code makes things a whole lot more readable and understandable than all of the common table expressions in the entire world. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video, and goodbye.